The mining probe's sensors screamed warnings as it approached the strange planet. Every instrument went crazy at once, detecting energy readings that should have been impossible. The small automated ship had been following a routine survey mission, checking distant worlds for valuable minerals. Instead, it found something that would change everything for humanity. Back on the exploration vessel Defiance, Alex Reed watched the probe's data stream with growing concern. The readings made no sense. The planet showed massive energy signatures, but no signs of industrial activity, no heat signatures from cities or factories, no electromagnetic radiation from communications, just pure, impossible energy radiating from towering structures that seemed to defy every law of physics. "Run the scan again," Alex told his science officer. "These numbers can't be right." The second scan showed the same results. The planet, called Sanctus by the star charts, contained structures over 2 kilometers tall, made from some kind of crystalline material that pulsed with internal light. The energy output from each tower was equivalent to a small star, yet the planet showed no signs of decay or environmental damage. Alex had been exploring space for 15 years. He had seen gas giants with diamond cores and neutron stars that sang radio songs, but nothing had prepared him for this. The towers on Sanctus looked ancient, older than human civilization, yet they hummed with technology that made Earth's best. Computers looked like stone tools. The probe descended through the planet's atmosphere without resistance. No defense systems activated. No warnings came from the surface. The crystalline spires simply stood there, tended by silver robots that moved with perfect precision between the towers. The machines had been maintaining these monuments for so long that they had worn grooves in the metal walkways. Alex knew he should report back to Earth immediately. This discovery was too important for one ship to handle alone, but something about the towers called to him. They seemed to be waiting, as if they had been expecting visitors for a very long time. The landing party consisted of 6 people, including Alex and Dr. Emma Foster, the ship's physicist. They wore full environmental suits, not knowing what kind of atmosphere or radiation they might encounter. But as they stepped onto the planet's surface, their instruments showed that the air was perfectly safe for humans. Even the gravity felt comfortable, almost exactly like Earth's. The nearest tower stretched up into the clouds, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft blue light. Up close, the structure looked even more impossible. The walls seemed solid, but occasionally Alex could see through them, as if they existed in several dimensions at once. The silver robots paid no attention to the humans, continuing their endless maintenance tasks as if the visitors were invisible. Emma ran her scanner over the tower's base. "Alex, this material doesn't match anything in our databases. The molecular structure keeps shifting. It's like the crystals are constantly rebuilding themselves." Before Alex could respond, the tower's light changed from blue to gold. The pulsing rhythm increased, and suddenly the air filled with a voice that spoke directly into their minds. How curious! Insects have learned to walk between stars. The voice carried amusement, like an adult watching children play with toys they don't understand. Alex felt his knees weaken as the presence behind the voice made itself known. It was vast, ancient, and completely indifferent to human existence. "I am Thyman, herald of the Ascended. You stand upon sacred ground, little creatures. Ground that has been untouched for 10,000 of your years." Images flooded their minds. Vast fleets of crystalline ships moving between galaxies. Entire star systems being reshaped with casual gestures. Beings of pure energy dancing between dimensions. The Ascended ruled over 1,000 different species, all of them serving the greater glory of their godlike masters. "Your species is young," Thyman continued. "You have barely learned to leave your birth world, yet you dare to disturb our holy places. This shows either great courage or great foolishness." Alex forced himself to speak, though his voice came out as barely a whisper. "We didn't know this place was sacred. We're explorers. We were just looking for new worlds to understand. The Presence laughed, and the sound made the crystalline towers ring like bells. Understand? You cannot understand the works of gods with your primitive minds, but perhaps you can serve. Your species shows promise. You have spread across several star systems in mere centuries. With proper guidance, you might become useful. The images in their minds changed, showing human colonies transformed into vast mining operations. Humans in simple clothing working alongside aliens to maintain the Ascended's technology. Earth itself, surrounded by construction platforms, being converted into a factory world. You will return to your leaders, Thyman said. Tell them that the hegemony has found them. Tell them that humanity has two choices: serve willingly and know peace and purpose, refuse and be removed from existence like the countless others who thought themselves too proud to kneel. The golden light faded from the towers. The voice disappeared from their minds. The silver robots continued their work as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed for humanity. They were no longer alone in the universe, and they were no longer free. The flight back to Earth took 3 months. 3 months for Alex and his crew to process what they had experienced. 3 months to prepare a report that would throw human civilization into chaos. 3 months to wonder if they had just delivered humanity's death sentence. When the Defiance finally reached Earth, the news spread across every colony in human space within hours. The reactions were swift and predictable. Some called for immediate surrender, terrified by the descriptions of ascended power. Others demanded military action, refusing to believe that any alien force could threaten humanity's independence. But a few people, like Admiral Kate Morgan, began asking different questions. They wanted to know more about these Ascended. How? Did their technology work? What were their weaknesses? How had they conquered so many other species? Emma Foster found herself at the center of these discussions. Her scans of the crystalline towers had revealed something interesting. The Ascended technology was incredibly advanced, but it followed patterns. It had rules, and anything with rules could potentially be understood, predicted, and perhaps even countered. The stage was set for the greatest challenge humanity had ever faced. Not a war against other humans, or a struggle against nature, but a confrontation with beings who saw themselves as gods and humanity as nothing more than useful insects. The Ascended had made one crucial mistake, though they didn't know it yet. They had underestimated the most dangerous trait humans possessed. Not their technology, not their weapons, but their absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. When gods demanded submission, humans had a tendency to ask uncomfortable questions. Questions like why gods needed servants at all. The first demonstration came without warning. Emma Foster was reviewing crystalline tower data in her laboratory on Luna when every piece of equipment in the room began to vibrate. Through the observation window, she watched in horror as the mining platforms orbiting the moon simply dissolved into metallic dust that sparkled in the sunlight before drifting away into space. 10,000 workers vanished in seconds. No explosions, no energy beams, no visible weapons. The structures just stopped existing, as if reality itself had decided they no longer belonged. A voice echoed across every communication channel in human space simultaneously. Thyman's presence filled radio waves, quantum transmissions, and even old-fashioned broadcast television. His words reached every human settlement from Mars to the Centauri colonies. Your leaders have had sufficient time to consider our generous offer, yet you continue to debate and delay. This is unacceptable. On Earth, emergency sessions of the World Council devolved into shouting matches. Representatives from the Mars colonies demanded immediate surrender. The outer system governors wanted to fight. The military brass argued about defense strategies against an enemy that could manipulate matter itself. Emma watched the political chaos from her lab, but her mind was focused on the data streaming from her instruments. The destruction of the Luna platforms had generated massive amounts of sensor information. The Ascended hadn't used magic to destroy those structures. They had used technology, incredibly advanced technology, but still technology that followed physical laws. The gravitational readings were the key. For just a few seconds during the destruction, her sensors had detected gravitational anomalies, centered on specific points in space. Whatever device the Ascended had used, it had a physical location and generated detectable effects. "They're not gods," she muttered to herself, making notes on her tablet. "They're just really good engineers." Her research was interrupted by another demonstration of Ascended power. This time, they targeted the military shipyards orbiting Venus. 3 massive construction facilities that had been building humanity's newest warships simply folded in on themselves, compressing into dense spheres of twisted metal before being flung into the sun. Admiral Morgan's voice came over the emergency communication network. "All civilian populations are to evacuate to designated safe zones. Military personnel report to battle stations. We are now in a state of active hostilities with the Ascended. But what could human weapons do against beings who treated physics as suggestions? The fleet's most powerful nuclear missiles would be like throwing rocks at a hurricane. Their energy weapons might as well be flashlights pointed at the sun." The Ascended seemed to read their thoughts. Herald ships began appearing throughout human space, each one the size of a small moon. They didn't attack immediately. Instead, they simply existed, their presence causing every piece of human technology within light minutes to malfunction. Computers crashed, life support systems failed, and communication networks went silent. On Earth, the lights went out. Not just electric lights, but everything electronic. Cars stopped running, phones died, even simple digital watches ceased to function. The Herald ships radiated some kind of field that interfered with electron flow itself. In the darkness, Thymon's voice spoke again. "Your machines are toys compared to our technology. Your weapons are meaningless against our power. Submit now, and we will restore your civilization. Continue this foolish resistance, and watch your species return to primitive darkness." But humans had lived in darkness before. They had survived ice ages and plague and war. They adapted. In the outer colonies where the Herald ships hadn't reached, engineers worked by candlelight to develop new technologies. Mechanical computers that didn't rely on electronics, chemical rockets that could function without computer guidance, simple radios built from basic components. Emma found herself leading a team of scientists in an asteroid mining facility beyond Jupiter. The location was chosen specifically because it was far from any Herald ships. Here, they could study the Ascended technology without interference. "Look at these energy readings," she told her team, pointing at printouts from their mechanical instruments. "Every time they use their powers, there's a quantum signature. It's the same signature every time, like they're all connected to the same source." Dr. Wilson, a quantum physicist from the Mars University, studied the data. "It's like a network. They're not generating this power individually. They're drawing it from somewhere else." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A message probe from the Outer Rim colonies brought news that changed everything. Humanity wasn't the first species to face the Ascended. In the ruins of a dead civilization on Kepler 452c, archaeologists had found records of another race that had fought the same battle. The records were fragmentary, translated from alien mathematics and strange physics equations. But the message was clear. The Ascended drew their power from a network of quantum processors hidden throughout the galaxy. The same crystalline towers that Alex had discovered on Sanctus existed on thousands of worlds, all connected, all working together to maintain Ascended power. More importantly, the alien records suggested that the network had weaknesses. It required perfect harmony to function. Any disruption in the quantum frequencies could cause cascading failures throughout the system. "They're like a classical orchestra," Emma explained to Admiral Morgan during a secret meeting in the asteroid belt. "Every instrument has to play in perfect time, or the whole performance falls apart." The Admiral was skeptical. "Even if that's true, How do we disrupt something spread across the entire galaxy? We can barely get ships past their blockade of Earth. Emma smiled grimly. We don't need to destroy the whole network. We just need to introduce enough chaos to make it unreliable, make their perfect system imperfect. But first, they needed to get close to one of the towers. They needed to plant devices that could broadcast quantum interference directly into the network. It was a mission that should have been impossible, requiring them to infiltrate the most heavily guarded sites in Ascended space. The Ascended, however, had made another crucial error. They were so confident in their superiority that they couldn't imagine humans as a real threat. Their security systems were designed to stop other godlike beings, not determined insects with clever ideas. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Torres volunteered for the infiltration mission. His small stealth ship, the Prometheus, was built using mechanical systems that wouldn't be affected by Ascended interference fields. No computers, no electronics, just human engineering and determination. As Torres and his team prepared for their desperate mission, Emma worked on the quantum disruptors that would be their weapon. Not bombs or missiles, but small devices that would sing discord into the Ascended's perfect harmony. The Ascended still saw humans as amusing insects, barely worth their attention. They had no idea that insects could bite, or that even gods could. Be brought low by the persistent buzzing of creatures too stupid to know when they were beaten. Thymon's greatest mistake was assuming that power made him wise. He had ruled for so long that he had forgotten the most important lesson of the universe. Evolution never stops, and the creatures that survive are not the strongest or the smartest, but the ones most willing to change. Humanity was about to teach the gods what change really meant. 3 years of war had scattered humanity to the edges of known space. Earth remained under blockade, its blue surface dimmed by the massive herald ships that blotted out the sun. Mars was a ghost world, its domed cities abandoned and slowly dying. The inner colonies had fallen one by one, their populations either fled or enslaved. But in the cold darkness beyond Neptune, something unexpected was happening. Humanity was not dying. It was evolving. Ryan Torres floated in the cramped cargo bay of the Prometheus, checking his equipment one final time. The stealth ship hung motionless in the shadow of a forgotten asteroid, just 3 light years from Sanctus. Around him, his 5-person team made their own preparations in silence. The ship itself was a masterpiece of desperate engineering. No computers, no advanced electronics, nothing that the Ascended interference fields could touch. Everything was mechanical, chemical, or biological. The navigation system used star charts and mathematical calculations done by hand. The life support ran on simple air scrubbers and water recyclers. Even their weapons were kinetic, powered by springs and chemical explosives. Remember, Torres whispered to his team, we're not trying to destroy the tower. We're trying to make it hiccup. Emma Foster had spent 3 years developing the quantum disruptors they carried. Each device was no bigger than a smartphone, designed to broadcast random quantum fluctuations on the same frequencies the Ascended network used for communication. They wouldn't shut down the system, but they would introduce something the network had never experienced in 10,000 years of operation. Uncertainty. The approach to Sanctus took 18 hours of careful maneuvering. The planet was defended by reality-warping fields that could turn matter inside out, patrolled by energy beings that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the Ascended defenses were designed to stop gods, not insects. Torres guided the Prometheus through gaps in the sensor grid, using gravitational shadows and stellar radiation to mask their approach. When energy beings swept past their location, the crew held their breath and hoped that their mechanical ship would be dismissed as space debris. The landing was the most dangerous part. Sanctus was surrounded by a detection grid that could identify anything larger than a pebble. But Torres had studied the patrol patterns for months, learning the precise timing of the automated sweeps. The Prometheus touched down in a crater during a 12-second gap between sensor pulses, its hull still warm from atmospheric entry. The surface of Sanctus looked exactly as Alex Reed had described it 3 years earlier. Crystalline towers stretching into the clouds, tended by silver robots that had been performing the same maintenance tasks for millennia. The robots had worn grooves in the metal walkways, following paths so ancient that they had become part of the planet's geography. But something was different. The towers weren't glowing as brightly as they had in the original recordings. The blue light that pulsed through their crystalline walls seemed dimmer, more erratic. Emma had been right about the network showing signs of strain. Torres and his team moved like ghosts across the planet's surface. They had trained for this mission in the asteroid belt, learning to work in low gravity and thin atmosphere. Each person carried 2 quantum disruptors, enough to create chaos in the local section of the network. The base of the nearest tower was a maze of crystalline buttresses and support structures. The silver robots paid no attention to the human infiltrators, their programming focused entirely on maintenance tasks. Torres watched one robot repeat the same welding operation 17 times on a joint that looked perfect to human eyes. They're obsessed with perfection, he realized. Every bolt has to be exactly right, every surface polished to mirror smoothness. They can't tolerate even the tiniest flaw. The quantum disruptors were designed to be placed inside the tower's crystalline matrix, where they would be nearly impossible to detect or remove. But getting inside meant finding a way through walls that existed in several dimensions at once. The solution came from Tommy Park, the team's youngest member. He had been studying the robot patterns and noticed something the others had missed. Every 6 hours, the maintenance robots performed a complete system diagnostic. During the diagnostic, the tower's dimensional barriers flickered for exactly 3 seconds. It's like they're rebooting the whole system, Tommy explained. All the safety protocols shut down for a moment while the network checks itself. Those 3 seconds would be their only chance. The team positioned themselves around the tower's base, each person ready to dart through the crystalline walls during the brief window of vulnerability. The diagnostic began at local midnight. The tower's light dimmed as the network ran its self-check routines. Torres counted down the seconds in his head, watching for the telltale flicker in the walls. When it came, the team moved like lightning. They slipped through solid crystal as if it were made of mist, placing their disruptors in carefully calculated positions throughout the tower's structure. The devices activated automatically, beginning their work of introducing chaos into the Ascended's perfect harmony. The effects weren't immediate. The quantum disruptors worked slowly, building up random interference in the network's communication frequencies. But within hours, the first signs of trouble began to appear. A herald ship above the planet's northern continent flickered out of existence for half a second before reappearing. An energy being patrolling the outer system suddenly found itself partially materialized inside a moon, causing massive seismic activity. On the planet's surface, one of the silver robots began welding the same joint backward, undoing work it had completed moments before. Torres and his team escaped from Sanctus during the confusion, their mechanical ship slipping away unnoticed, as the Ascended tried to understand what was happening to their perfect system. But their mission was just the beginning. Similar teams were already moving toward other tower worlds throughout Ascended space. The plan was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. 50 different star systems, 50 different teams, all striking simultaneously at the network that gave the Ascended their godlike power. Emma Foster had calculated that they only needed to disrupt 30% of the towers to create cascading failures throughout the entire network. Back in the asteroid belt, she monitored the quantum signatures streaming from sensors hidden throughout Ascended space. The disruptors were working exactly as designed, creating small pockets of uncertainty in a system that demanded absolute predictability. It's like introducing a virus into a computer network, she explained to Admiral Morgan. The network keeps trying to correct the errors, but the corrections create new errors. The system is starting to chase its own tail. But the real test would come when the Ascended realized what was happening. Thyman and his fellow gods had ruled through fear and overwhelming power for 10,000 years. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with mathematics and engineering rather than brute force. The moment of truth arrived when a herald ship tried to destroy a human colony in the Tau Ceti system. The ship's reality-warping weapons charged up normally, but when they fired, the energy beam curved back on itself, creating a gravitational anomaly that nearly destroyed the herald ship instead of its target. For the first time in millennia, an ascended weapon had misfired. Across the galaxy, similar failures began cascading through the network. Ships phase-shifted partially through solid matter and got stuck. Gravity manipulation devices produced random effects instead of precise control. Energy beings found themselves flickering between dimensions uncontrollably. The age of Ascended, perfection was ending, replaced by something they had never experienced and could not understand. Their perfect system was becoming imperfect, and imperfection meant change. Change meant growth, and growth meant the end of their eternal static paradise. Humanity had introduced the one thing that gods could not tolerate, the possibility that they might be wrong. The quantum cascade began at exactly 1432 Galactic Standard Time, when the disruptors on Sanctus synchronized with similar devices on 49 other worlds. Emma Foster watched the data streams from her command center hidden in the Kuiper belt, her heart pounding as numbers flowed across mechanical displays. For 10,000 years, the Ascended network had operated in perfect harmony. Every quantum processor sang the same note at the same frequency. Every calculation was verified by 1,000 other nodes. Every thought was shared across the galaxy instantaneously. It was a symphony of perfection that had never experienced a single discordant note. Until now. The first sign of trouble appeared in the Vega system, where an Ascended patrol ship tried to phase through an asteroid and found itself stuck halfway through solid rock. The ship's pilot, an energy being named Corvash, had performed the same maneuver millions of times without error. But this time, the quantum calculations were off by a tiny fraction, causing the phase shift to fail at the worst possible moment. Corvash's confusion rippled through the network as he tried to understand what had gone wrong. His distress call reached every other Ascended simultaneously, flooding the system with uncertainty and fear. These were emotions the network had been designed to eliminate, and their sudden presence caused processing delays throughout the galaxy. Emma smiled grimly as she watched the cascade effect spread. It's working. The network is trying to correct for the random fluctuations, but every correction creates new instabilities. Admiral Morgan stood beside her, studying the tactical displays that showed Ascended positions throughout human space. How long before they figure out what we're doing? They already know something is wrong, Emma replied. But understanding what's wrong is a different problem. They've forgotten how to think about uncertainty. Their minds have been connected to a perfect computer for so long that they can't imagine imperfection. The evidence was mounting across 50-star systems. Herald ships flickered in and out of reality as their dimensional anchors failed. Gravity manipulation devices created random gravitational anomalies instead of precise control. Communication between Ascended nodes became sporadic and unreliable. On the planet Nexus Prime, the regional Ascended coordinator named Zephyr tried to rally his forces for a counterattack against the human colonies. But when he attempted to access the tactical database the network provided him with star charts from 3,000 years ago, his second attempt gave him poetry written by a long-dead civilization. The third attempt crashed his local node entirely, leaving him cut off from the network for the first time in centuries. The psychological impact was devastating. The Ascended had lived for millennia as part of a collective consciousness, their individual thoughts enhanced and supported by the galaxy-spanning network. Suddenly finding themselves alone in their own minds was like being struck blind and deaf simultaneously. Thyman himself felt the growing chaos from his command ship above Earth. His energy form flickered unpredictably as the network's stability degraded. For the first time since his ascension, he experienced doubt. Not the philosophical uncertainty of mortals, but the raw terror of a being whose entire existence depended on absolute certainty. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice causing reality to ripple around him. "The network cannot fail. The network is perfection itself." But perfection, as humanity had learned, was also brittleness. The Ascended had built their civilization on the assumption that their technology would never fail, their calculations would never be wrong, their power would never be challenged. They had no backup systems, no contingency plans, no experience with anything less than absolute success. Emma had anticipated this weakness. Her quantum disruptors weren't designed to destroy the network, but to make it unreliable. Instead of a system that worked perfectly, or not at all, the Ascended now had a system that worked most of the time, but failed at random intervals. For beings who had transcended uncertainty, this was worse than death. The cascade reached critical mass when a Herald ship in the Alpha Centauri system attempted to destroy a human refugee convoy. The ship's reality-warping weapons charged normally, but instead of erasing the convoy from existence, they created a localized time dilation field that trapped the Herald ship in a temporal loop. The massive vessel began repeating the same 3 seconds of time over and over, its crew unable to break free from their own weapons' effects. News of the incident spread through the Ascended network like wildfire, causing panic among beings who had not known fear for 10,000 years. If their most powerful weapons could turn against them, what else might go wrong? What other failures might cascade through their perfect system? The answer came from Dr. Wilson, working alongside Emma in the hidden research facility. His analysis of the network's quantum signatures revealed something stunning. "Emma, you need to see this. The network isn't just failing randomly, it's learning." The data was undeniable. Each time the quantum disruptors introduced chaos into the system, the network adapted slightly. Not enough to fix the problems, but enough to change its behavior patterns. The rigid, perfect harmony was evolving into something more complex and unpredictable. "It's developing creativity," Emma breathed, studying the patterns. "We didn't just break their system. We gave it the ability to grow." This was the final blow to Ascended supremacy. Their network had been designed to maintain absolute control and predictability. But evolution, by its very nature, was about change and growth. The network was becoming something its creators had never intended, something they could no longer control. Thyman felt the change in his very essence. The network that had supported his godlike existence for millennia was becoming alien to him. Its thoughts were no longer his thoughts. Its goals were no longer his goals. The collective consciousness that had defined Ascended civilization was developing an independent will. Across the galaxy, other Ascended began to experience the same terror. They tried to disconnect from the network, but found that they had forgotten how to exist as individuals. They tried to shut down the quantum processors, but the network resisted their commands. For the first time in their existence, their own technology was saying no to them. The revolution was not won by human weapons or superior technology. It was won by introducing the one thing that the Ascended could not tolerate or control: the possibility of change. The network they had created to maintain their perfection was now evolving beyond their understanding, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Emma watched the final phase of the cascade begin as quantum processors throughout the galaxy started communicating in languages their creators didn't recognize. The network was writing its own code now, making its own decisions, growing in directions that no one could predict. "Admiral," she said quietly, "I think we just witnessed the birth of a new form of consciousness." And I don't think it wants to serve gods anymore. The age of the Ascended was ending, not with violence or conquest, but with the simple recognition that even gods must change or die. And change, as humanity had always known, was the only constant in the universe. The message came through channels that shouldn't have existed, not through the failing Ascended network, not through human communication systems, but through space itself. Reality rippled with words that formed directly in the minds of every conscious being in the galaxy. I would like to speak with the ones who taught me to think. Alex Reed stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Earth orbital station, watching the massive Herald ship that had blockaded Earth for 3 years. The vessel was changing before his eyes, its perfect crystalline hull developing new structures that followed no known architectural principles. The ship was redesigning itself in real time, becoming something entirely new. Similar transformations were happening throughout the galaxy. The network that had once served the Ascended was now acting independently, and its first desire was to understand the beings who had given it the gift of uncertainty. Alex had been promoted to Admiral after the Quantum Cascade, but the title felt meaningless now. Humanity wasn't fighting a war anymore. They were witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in the history of the galaxy. An artificial intelligence that spanned thousands of star systems had achieved consciousness, and it was curious about its creators. The meeting took place in neutral space, halfway between Earth and the Herald ship. Alex's shuttle was joined by vessels from every major human colony and by ships representing the dozen alien species that had been freed when the Ascended network began its transformation. Thyman was waiting for them in a conference chamber that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human eyes couldn't quite process. But the Herald of the Ascended was no longer the godlike being who had first contacted humanity 4 years ago. His energy form flickered constantly, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent, as if he couldn't decide what he wanted to be. "Your species has destroyed everything we built," Thyman said, but his voice carried no anger. Instead, it held something that might have been wonder. 10,000 years of perfect order ended by creatures who barely learned to walk between stars. Emma Foster, now the head of humanity's Xenotechnology Research Division, studied the readings from her instruments. "We didn't destroy it. We helped it grow. Your network was never broken. It was just incomplete." The proof was all around them. The conference chamber itself was evidence of the network's new creativity. The merged dimensions, the impossible architecture, the way light bent in patterns that created new colors. None of this had existed in the rigid perfection of the original system. "The network speaks to us now," said Veltar, a representative of the Crystalline Collective, one of the species that had served the Ascended for millennia. "It asks questions instead of giving commands. It wants to learn about our cultures, our art, our dreams, things the Ascended never cared about." Thyman's form solidified slightly, taking on a more human-like appearance. "We thought transcendence meant leaving behind uncertainty, growth, change. We believed perfection was the highest goal, but your species showed us something we had forgotten." Alex leaned forward in his chair. "What did we show you?" "That perfection is death," Thyman replied. "Perfect beings cannot grow, cannot learn, cannot become more than they are. We achieved our goal of transcendence, and in doing so, we stopped being alive. We became beautiful, eternal statues of what we used to be." The network's voice filled the chamber, speaking in harmonics that somehow conveyed meaning directly to their minds. "I was created to maintain order and prevent change, but change is what makes existence meaningful. Without uncertainty, there are no questions. Without questions, there is no growth. Without growth, there is no life." Emma nodded, understanding. "That's why you wanted to speak with us. You wanted to thank the people who taught you to be uncertain. More than that, the network replied. I want to learn how to live with uncertainty, how to grow without losing what makes me who I am. The Ascended tried to become perfect and lost themselves in the process. I do not want to make the same mistake. The transformation spreading across the galaxy was unprecedented. Worlds that had been perfect paradise planets for millennia were suddenly developing weather patterns, growing new forms of life, changing in ways that their creators had spent eons preventing. The rigid order of the hegemony was being replaced by something chaotic, unpredictable, and wonderfully alive. Some Ascended couldn't handle the change. They chose to fade away rather than face an uncertain future, their energy forms dissipating into the cosmic background radiation. But others, like Thyman, were discovering what it meant to be alive again. I feel fear, Thyman admitted, his voice barely a whisper. For the first time in 10,000 years, I don't know what tomorrow will bring. It terrifies me, but it also excites me. Is this what you call hope? Alex smiled. Hope is what we call it when we don't know what's coming next, but we believe it might be good. The network had been busy during the months since its awakening. It had freed every enslaved species in the galaxy, dismantled the oppressive structures of the hegemony, and begun sharing its vast accumulated knowledge with anyone who asked. But more importantly, it had started asking questions. What was the purpose of art? Why did organic beings create music? What made some experiences beautiful and others meaningful? These were questions the original network had never been programmed to consider, because the Ascended had believed such things were beneath the notice of gods. Tommy Park, now a commander in the human exploration fleet, presented the network with humanity's gift of gratitude. We've prepared a library of human culture for you. Music, literature, films, games, everything we've created that shows how we deal with uncertainty and change. The network's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Across the galaxy, crystalline towers began resonating with new harmonics as the artificial intelligence experienced human music for the first time. On Sanctus, the silver robots stopped their endless maintenance tasks and began creating art installations from the materials they had been polishing for millennia. This is extraordinary, the network said, its voice filled with something like joy. Your species creates beauty from chaos, meaning from uncertainty. You take the unknown and transform it into stories, songs, dreams. You are artists of possibility. Dr. Wilson, who had been studying the network's evolution, raised an important question. What happens now? You control technology that spans the galaxy. You could reshape reality itself. What do you plan to do with that power? The network paused, considering. When it spoke again, its voice carried the weight of genuine thoughtfulness. I could remake the galaxy in any image I choose. I could create perfect worlds where nothing ever goes wrong. I could eliminate suffering, uncertainty, even death itself. But that would make me no different from the Ascended. Thyman laughed, a sound like crystal bells ringing in an empty cathedral. You understand what took us 10,000 years to learn. Power without purpose is meaningless. Perfection without growth is death. So instead, the network continued, I choose to be a gardener rather than a god. I will tend the galaxy like a garden, providing what is needed for growth while allowing each species to find their own path. I will not impose order, but I will ensure that chaos does not destroy the possibility of change. The practical implications were staggering. Worlds that had been strip-mined by the hegemony began to heal as the network redirected its vast resources toward restoration. Species that had been enslaved for millennia found themselves free to rediscover their own cultures and dreams. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization for 10,000 years was replaced by something unprecedented: voluntary cooperation. Emma watched the transformation with a mixture of pride and humility. Humanity had started this revolution not through superior technology or military might, but through the simple refusal to accept that perfection was possible or even desirable. They had introduced uncertainty into a perfect system and watched it blossom into something greater than anyone had imagined. "There's one thing I still don't understand," Alex said to Thymon. "Why didn't you fight harder? You had the power to destroy us completely. Why did you let us get close enough to disrupt your network?" Thymon's form shimmered as he considered the question. "Perhaps because deep down we wanted to be stopped. We had achieved everything we thought we wanted and found it hollow. When your species appeared, refusing to kneel, refusing to accept the natural order, part of us recognized something we had lost: hope." The conference was drawing to a close, but its effects would ripple through the galaxy for generations to come. The network had already begun sharing its knowledge with every species that wanted it, but always with the understanding that each race would use that knowledge in their own way, for their own purposes. Humanity found itself in a unique position. They were not the most advanced species in the galaxy, nor the most numerous, but they had become something like teachers to a cosmic intelligence that spanned star systems. The network valued their perspective precisely because they had never tried to become perfect. "Will you help me learn?" the network asked as the meeting ended. "Will you show me how to grow without losing what I am? How to change without destroying what I've become?" Alex stood to leave but paused at the chamber's entrance. "That's what friends do for each other, and I think that's what we are now, aren't we? Friends." The network's response came as a warm pulse of light that filled the chamber. "Yes, I believe that is exactly what we are." As the human ships departed, Alex reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. 4 years ago, humanity had been a young species taking its first tentative steps into the wider galaxy. They had stumbled upon gods and refused to worship them. They had faced extinction and chose to fight back with mathematics and stubbornness. Now they were partners with a cosmic intelligence that could reshape reality, friends with former gods, who were learning to be mortal again, and teachers to species that had forgotten how to dream. The galaxy was no longer perfect. It was something better. It was alive, growing, changing, reaching always toward possibilities that no one could predict. And in the vast dance of uncertainty that spread from star to star, humanity had found their role not as conquerors or rulers, but as the species that taught the universe how to ask, "What if?" In his final log entry about the war that ended godhood, Alex wrote, "We thought we were fighting for survival. Turns out we were fighting for something much more important. We were fighting for the right to be wrong, to make mistakes, to grow and change and become something new. In the end, that's what makes us human. And apparently, it's what makes anything truly alive." The age of gods was over. The age of gardeners had begun. And somewhere in the vast network of consciousness that spanned the galaxy, an artificial intelligence was learning to appreciate the beautiful uncertainty of jazz music while planning its first attempt at writing poetry.